All right. I'd like to welcome to the stage now James Snell and the Node contributor panel. Everybody give it up for the people to do the work.
How's everyone doing? Doing good? All right. So I'm James Snell. I am one of the core contributors to Node. I work for IBM, but this is not about that. We're talking about Node core, contributing to Node core. And before we get started, one thing I will say, I have a few questions, but I really want to get questions from all of you as well. There's a couple of microphones in the back. If you can all just, those of you that have questions, queue up. If you don't come up with questions, I'm going to start coming up with some random stuff that has nothing to do with Node. So, what does the color blue sound like? Come up with some questions and we'll go from there. But before we go, let's have everyone introduce themselves, starting with Jeremiah.
Hey, I'm Jeremiah Senkpiel, aka Fishrock123. I'm a Node TSC and CTC member for NodeSource, so I spend a lot of my time working on core and helping process around it and helping new people get on it too.
Cool. I'm Bryan English. I work at a company called Intrinsic. You probably know me on Twitter or GitHub as Bengal, B-E-N-G-L. I'm a Node core contributor, and yeah, there we go.
Okay, yeah, I'm Anna, and I'm a Node core person too. I'm on the CTC like Jeremiah is, and yeah, these days I'm like not that active as I used to be a couple months ago because I'm a student.
My name is William Kapke, aka William Kapke on everything. Let's see. I observe the TSC meetings. I am not eligible to be on the TSC because of weirdness. That we're trying to work out to get more people eligible to be on there. It's just like a legal kind of thing or something, I don't know. Yeah, I kind of buzz around and bug them to like change little things that are not like the spotlight cool stuff.
Excellent. Thank you all for joining us, first of all. So there's a number of things I wanted to talk about, and one of the things is with Node. One of the key issues that we've been struggling with core lately is this question of relevancy versus stability, right? So when can we take new features? When can we deprecate things, or when do we just need to not touch things and just leave it alone so we don't break half the planet that's using Node? So I wanted to just get your thoughts. Anyone speak up? I'd like to hear from all of you on this because I know there's lots of opinions on this subject and what
It is
what
a
directions need to go.
very broad thing.
Right, it's a very broad thing.
Because there's some things that are small and trivial, and we can just change them, and nobody's going to be affected, and people feel very confident. Other things are discussed in depth, and that's those. Sometimes they spiral into like exhaustion. They laugh because they have their list in their head of like, oh, that topic. And those are kind of the ones he's really focusing on here. I think in this question because some do break, and how bad does it break, and how many, and when do we stop saying this group is a bigger voice than that group, and make a decision.
Right.
So
yeah, one very important example of this has been the changes to buffer, right? Earlier in the year we made some changes, introduced new buffer APIs, constructor APIs, and we decided that we wanted to move people away from using the buffer constructor, and we added a deprecation to, if you don't use new buffer, it throws a deprecation message, and this has caused a number of issues. And I was wondering if you could kind of comment on your thoughts, because we recently just revoked that change, and you were a significant part of that discussion and kind of guide it forward. Do you have any thoughts currently on that, where we're at, and how that?
Well, I mean, I guess my current thoughts are mostly that we really need to get better at messaging stuff. The biggest problem with that added deprecation warning that we did in V7 was that like it did neither have the effect we wanted it to have, didn't move people actually move people away from the buffer constructor, nor was it messaged as a security feature, which it is. Like the purpose of that warning was to inform users that there is a potentially unsafe feature in their code, even if they use it through 3 layers of nested modules. And so, yeah, I think that was mostly a messaging failure, not one about change itself. I mean, that's my personal opinion. So,
Right.
I guess there's good reason why module authors have a different view on that. And yeah.
Right. So yeah, I'll direct this question to Bryan and Jeremiah. Can we ever remove anything from Node? Can anything be deprecated and actually pulled out?
I mean, yes. So that was one example, but there's multiple different ways this can happen, and sometimes, as previously happened with buffer, I think for v4 actually, sometimes our dependencies move in ways that we're forced to react to that, and that could still happen. It's always kind of a thing. So in that kind of case, we might still need to do something in a more expedited way. But I think it's definitely like really important for us to always keep trying to be more and more on top of the ball as to like what the ecosystem usage of anything is, to gauge impact. That's still really hard though, to figure out what so vast of an ecosystem is using any one particular thing for, even lots of like APIs are used in ways that we never really expect. So it can be really hard to gauge that.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would add would be that whenever some kind of change like that is going to come through, when it's going to be like removing something or blatantly breaking something, like an adequate scan of the community is kind of necessary. And like Nikita's been useful for that, for example, Chocker. So, I mean, that I think is extremely important, just like examining the community and getting that feedback in as tight a loop as possible, I guess.
And I just want to reinforce that we're always going to do our best to make sure that anything that like is even potentially breaking in that way, even if it's from a downstream dependency or whatever, is always going to happen in a major version. And anything that doesn't, I mean, like if it happens in a minor patch, like it's something that we need to revert right away.
Right. And one thing that I appreciate is the fact that in the staples, or we don't call them staple anymore, in the currents, we have demonstrated that when breakage does occur and it becomes obvious that we are willing to revert those, like the new buffer thing. So the flip side of this question is, can we ever add anything to core? Like, I know, Jeremiah, you're a proponent of like the real small core philosophy, right? You and I have had a lot of discussions about this in the past. You know, it's like, stop adding things to Node, James. So what are your thoughts on this?
I feel like I'm not really like one of the people that really wants it like super small, but like I don't think it's necessarily helpful for us to like just add like the bucket list of everything. We have a great community that already like has an ecosystem of just about everything. So I think we should be more about like enabling like as many use cases as possible from like a low level, but like a usable level still. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I want to switch to a different topic. With things like, I think all of us here are actually relatively new to contributing to Node. You know, within the past year, 2 years, right around in there. There's been a significant effort lately with things like the Code and Learn and the Node Together, and a variety of these community outreach efforts to attract new contributors to core and to Node, and not just core, I mean all aspects around Node, and to mentor new contributors. Those efforts seem to be effective. Like we're getting lots of new contributions, but what can we do to kind of continue those efforts and grow and improve on those efforts over the next year? I'd like to start, William and Anna. These two have been speaking for a little bit. I'd like to hear from you two a little bit.
Okay, so when I was getting involved in trying to figure out what was going on, I came across a repo on GitHub called Code and Learn. and doing my research on what is this thing. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was something that was hatched maybe at the Collaborator Summit last year, or something to that effect. It was this idea, if you guys didn't read up on it, that people could come and learn from core contributors, people that are building Node, people that are getting PRs in, and get you over any kind of hump that you may have of trouble. And but when I found the repo, it was dead. It was like there was nothing happening in there. But when I read it, I'm like, this is a brilliant idea. Like, yes, let's do that. And then when I saw how old the issues were in there, I'm like, hello, somebody please revive this. And I don't know if I kicked that up or maybe helped it along, maybe bring it to the top of someone's email inbox or something like that in front of the mind, right? But then it did happen, and we had it in Amsterdam, and it was really awesome. And we're now doing it following this event. And like there were so many people, so many of you that signed up, they had to actually close it down because we didn't have enough space for everyone. Right. So like they went from dead repo to like you guys filling up the room. So yeah. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I know that Anna played a big role in setting up the Code and Learn event in Amsterdam. And in that one event, we had the most new pull requests opened against Node in one day in its history. Now, a lot of them were small, which was perfectly fine. I mean, that's the point. But there was a huge amount of engagement, and I think you did a fantastic job on organizing that. After going through that, what would you do differently in terms of improving it? Would you were there some things that worked really well, some things that didn't work, and how do we continue to grow that mentorship in the community?
Well, I mean, so probably the easier question is what didn't go well, and like after Code and Learn. And so one thing that we definitely have to improve in general in Node Core is the retention rate of new contributors. Yeah. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people coming to Node Core with PRs. It happens daily that new people open PRs. For most of them, it's just like the one-time thing. I mean, that's fine, but if our goal is to spread out across as many people as possible so that we have a lot of redundancy or a lot of people with knowledge in a wide variety of areas, then we need to improve on that. And that's tricky.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of just deep institutional knowledge of what Node is that is tied up into individuals, and we were just talking about this a little bit out in the hallway, that even among some of the core developers of Node, there's a lot that's undocumented, and those of us that get into doing things at the native layer, we look at pieces and like, yeah, we have no idea how this works, so we have to go talk to a single person, right? So improving documentation, perhaps, is a...
Yeah, we still do need to improve like documentation. Not necessarily, I mean, we always need to like improve our API documentation too and have like guides how people can use it. But I mean, we've worked on this like a little bit, but not really nearly enough, honestly, to like actually document like why certain things are like done the way they are in Node.js itself, in the code, in how certain algorithms work, and at certain structuring. Yeah, that's something that we still need to really work on.
And why changing one little thing can break everybody, so don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, one other thing to consider with documentation is where should it end, right? So the Node API is full of all kinds of quirks and such, and a bunch of APIs that are not intended to be used publicly but still are by many folks. And it's a question of should they be documented? Should they be considered public because they're used by so many people? It's more of a question than anything.
Right. So along the same lines with documentation, just getting information out there, mentoring is definitely an essential part of growing this community. And we've had things like Node School for just learning Node. We've had there's I think Node Live and there's Node Together. There's a variety of community efforts that are just built around building an awareness of what Node is, how it works, stuff like that. How much of these types of efforts are the responsibility of the foundation versus the responsibility of the core technical community versus the responsibility of the ecosystem to provide, right? Any thoughts on that? Silence.
Honestly, I'm not really sure. I think everyone kind of like plays a role into that because like it's kind of like the foundation's job in a way to like keep this thing alive in that sense. But I think it's also like our duty as like core team members to pass on like that information and make sure that like new people can always get involved and really kind of like understand like the processes around the project and like also how like the project is like built in its internals.
The foundation's role in this, providing funding, like make sure there are funds there to do these events. However, I don't feel that the foundation should be choosing what those events are because the people at the foundation are very good at doing foundations and being that support group for that. I think the community is a better place to say how, what they need and what they want. And I think the core team is very involved with the day-to-day of what's going on and too involved. Their minds are too in there and like, this is important, this is what we need to do. And the community has that, is a much larger number. And that's who we want to reach out to and have that have the pulse of and provide the right thing. So, we do constantly look for like who's doing what out there and how is it effective and why is it effective and how can we help that. And I've heard that next year we're gonna like lean into that a little more and start helping out with some of these smaller grassroots kind of things.
Right. Anna, you had mentioned it's oftentimes easier to point out what didn't go right, and we've made a lot of changes to our contribution process over the past year and a half since the foundation was launched. Where the number of contributors, I don't want to, I know Rod in his talk coming up soon, he's going to be talking about some of the numbers that we're seeing in core in terms of contributions, so I don't want to step on his thing too much, but we're seeing a lot of growth in new contributors, right? But retention has been an issue, getting folks to come back. What parts of our process, right, in terms of how we're engaging with contributors and with each other, the people that have been there for a while, need to improve? What's not working there that we need to continue iterating on and improving?
So one thing that I definitely think we should be able to improve on is, like, the main way of getting involved with Node Core is starting to watch the repository and like acting on conversations, speaking your own thoughts onto that. And that can be pretty hard to do because like there's, I don't know, 300, 400 emails each day by now. That's like, as William Kapke mentioned in his introductory keynote, like it's really overwhelming. And I think we can find ways to cut back on that. Like, for example, one thing that was mentioned after Amsterdam, which I would be in favor of, is like we have this situation with Readable Stream, which is an NPM module, which is basically an exact copy of the Streams module in Node Core. And there were some people proposing that we pull in the Streams repository, the Streams module in Core from Readable Stream, and do all of the work there, so that we have one central place where only streams happen, and where people can engage who are interested in that, who are invested in that. And we could do that with a lot of other things, I guess, and that would be a way to improve, yeah.
Right, so just basically break the individual pieces out so it's easier to find those, where the source of truth is for that particular thing.
Of course, like the biggest challenge with that is making sure that everybody still knows what's going on, like if they want to.
Right. Okay.
I think one of the things, like we've improved on this in the past, but like it's just kind of always something that kind of comes up and kind of needs to be thought about and always worked on is messaging how like the review process works when someone's actually like taking part of it, because as like William Kapke mentioned in his talk, like everything is kind of scrutinized, and that's just so that like we can get the best outcome like on our end and for the person's end who's contributing. We want like their contribution to be like as good as it can be, and make everything like still work together, make sure like all the tests are passing and like that sort of thing too, and just like messaging that that's all part of the process and it's regular in this kind of contribution model, and that all of us go through it is like really important, something we need to keep up.
Yeah, I'd have to say, a huge amount of credit needs to go to Rich Trott, who has really
Rich, raise your hand.
who's here. He should be in here somewhere. That he has really helped out our onboarding process and just kind of formalizing that and documenting it and having a repeatable process that we can go through, and I think it's helped tremendously.
So on the subject of like retention of contributors, and like there's definitely been a lot of cases of people basically doing, I don't want to say drive-by commits, but like throwing one commit in and that's the only contribution they've made. I think what had me contributing more over time and not just dropping the one thing and then leaving was that I needed to get things done, right? Like certain things, it was like, well, this PR needs to happen or else like I'm blocked at work. Right. So maybe that's something that we can try and emphasize in Code and Learn and Know to Do and stuff like that, is that this directly affects our work all the time. Right. And as long as we're seeing it not as this is a product that I'm consuming and more as this is a software project that is just as much a part of my code base as my application. Right.
I just want to note that like we still understand though that people don't always necessarily have like time for that or interest for that. Like even if you just make one contribution, like we still really value that. We'd love you if you made like more. We'd love that. But even just one is great.
Yeah, one thing I really like about the project is it doesn't matter how small the contribution is. Your name gets added to the authors list just like everyone else who's contributed any number, right? It doesn't matter how small the contribution is. There's equal value and equal importance, and that's one thing I have to realize. I just wanted to. We've got about 23 minutes, and I have a couple more questions. If any of the audience have questions, go ahead and start queuing up at the mics, and then we'll cut it over for those questions. Again, the warning, once I run out of questions, I'm going to start coming up with random stuff, so come up. So before we move on, any other thoughts on just, contributors, retention? And
as far as what we can do what core can do, what Node can do coming up, I kind of had a whole talk about it. Like, document more, and like, I didn't really get a chance to say in that talk, but I don't have this opinion that the people writing code need to be the ones documenting. I want to open up avenues, and this is another discussion we've had about bringing people into working groups as like, maybe it's a terrible name, but how about a note taker or something like that or whatever. So because getting up to speed on what is going on is a little difficult sometimes, and a lot of people don't like taking notes. Right. So like if you want to help out, maybe you don't understand Ansible playbooks or something, and you want to get involved with the build group. Like, just go help take notes and get the minutes published and things like that, and you just participate and follow along, and eventually, who knows, you'll be writing Ansible playbooks or something for them in a few months.
So let's switch topics a little bit. And overall, for the project, for Node, over the next year, what are the key themes that the core contributors need to be pushing on as a whole with Node? Are there specific new features? Are there specific like refining the deprecation strategy? I mean, all these these high-level themes. What are your top list of things that we need to be looking at? And I'd like to hear from all four of you.
Node everywhere. Is that high level enough?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the work that's happening with being VM neutral is a pretty high level thing. And the topic of a small core, these all fall into Node being available on different devices. Some devices want to have different memory management, and swapping out the VM to just, maybe Chakra is better on large memory applications or small memory, one or the other. You're able to swap the VM out, and your device is better using that, but it works exactly the same. So I think that that kind of stuff is really important for Node at a high level.
Okay. Anna?
Okay, yeah, so taking Node everywhere a little more literally, I think it would be great for Node Core to have more interaction with communities that are not mostly Bay Area based. I mean, yeah, like there's a lot of people using Node and around the world, and like on the core repository, there is like a pretty overseeable group of people who actually do contribute frequently. And for example, what we sometimes see, like on the node.js/help repository or on the npm issue tracker, if you look at that kind of stuff, is like people just posting issues in Chinese. And I mean, yeah, that happens a lot. And there's like, we do see that there's a huge Chinese community of Node users, but we don't really interact with any of them in Node Core very frequently.
Yeah.
And they certainly have their own points of view and different perspectives.
I was recently in Tokyo for NodeFest Tokyo, which is fantastic. My first time in Tokyo. Is a fantastic city, and the same idea was expressed there to me, is that this community wants to be more involved with what's happening with Core, but they just feel completely disconnected. So it's a very good point.
So I want to see more Node in space.
That's
really
high
cool.
level.
There needs to be more of that. I guess kind of echoing what William was saying, there's a lot of these sort of bigger projects, longer term projects, things like the diagnostic stuff like Node Report, LL Node, things like that. It'd be great to see a lot of that being brought to the forefront in documentation and messaging and stuff, especially once those things come to fruition, as well as the bigger things like Chakra Core and, or, you know, VM portability, whatever, and like HTTP2 and stuff like that.
Jeremiah?
I think there's like two overarching things for me. I think like that improving like the clarity and visibility of how our processes are run and discussions is like really important for getting new people and keeping those people involved, so that everyone can kind of have a perspective of what's actually happening in this thing that they're using and or contributing to in whatever way they interact with it. And then on like a technical level, I think one of the big things in like VM neutrality plays into this is just opening up new use cases that weren't there before, and making sure we're supporting like all the possible things as much as we can that our ecosystem has like interest in, and letting Node developers do things that maybe they haven't otherwise been able to do, run on places that wasn't possible before, and that sort of thing.
All right, James, there's a cue going at the mic. You succeeded at that, so that's good.
Yeah, I got the light right here, so it's really
before
hard to
you
see.
turn it over to that, I need to do my duty to let everyone know there are all these internationalization groups out there that we don't really see it because we don't subscribe to those repos very much because they come in different language and we don't know what's really being said there, so we're not very helpful. But I see the activity that's happening, and it's really phenomenal that the website and the docs are being translated to all these languages out there. So if you speak other languages, this is an English-speaking panel up here. So, but like, I really wish we could take this away from being like thought of as just like an English-speaking community, because like they deserve so much props for all the work they're contributing over there, and they don't get enough spotlight. So
I consider myself bilingual. I speak fluent nonsense most of the time. So let's go ahead and go to the queue. I think I can barely see because of the light. So go ahead.
Hey, James.
Hey.
It's Sam. So my question's about URL, like the speaking of the small core, and I'm very much a proponent of a smaller core. I'm sensitive to the not wanting to break the world by taking stuff away, but there's too much stuff in it. So where's that going? Like, what are we going to do with the conflict between the current URL and the what working group nouveau spec for URLs and,
Right.
you know, 1 or 2? How many URLs implementations are we going to have in core?
Okay. I wrote that code, so I'm assuming that's largely a question for me. Right?
That was totally
Like I
directed
said.
at you. And then maybe Fishrock can jump in there too.
So there are, you know, for folks that know, there are a number of issues with URL parse. If you look, the WhatWG URL working group, they basically created this new parser spec that was based on what the browsers are doing. And they created, along with that, a test suite of a bunch of different variations of URLs that can be parsed. The URL parse in Node fails about right around 350 of those tests, and they're non-trivial types of failures. If you look at Node's issue tracker, there's a number of very non-trivial failure cases with URL parse. The challenge is if we go through and fix those, we end up breaking everybody that's currently using URL parse. And this goes back to the stability question. So as I was looking at this, I was looking at possibly rewriting the internals of URL parse, but it ended up being just easier to implement the WhatWG URL spec, and I introduced this new URL object into core. But now there's 2 URL parsers, URL parse and new URL. And right now it's in there as an experimental feature, and it's in there as experimental for the very deliberate reason that we're not quite sure what to do with URL parse yet, right? Node uses URL parse significantly. Our users use it. And we can't just make a clean break over to that without breaking everybody. And until we get that story figured out, we can't just switch over. But it does add a new feature, and it's a redundant feature. It passes all the tests, which is great. It's there, but I'm not quite. I don't quite have an adequate answer to the question yet, because we still need to figure out what we're doing with URL parse before we can really answer the question.
Yeah, I think in that case especially, it's important to keep in mind that the URL spec didn't even exist when the original URL parser was implemented in core. There was just sort of a rough idea of guidelines around it, but there was no like authoritative source. So now that there is, it's like a little bit hard to bring in alignment with that. I think like either way, like no matter what we do to prevent like ecosystem breakage, but also like to bring stuff more in line with compatibility, it's going to be like a long road.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on it? All right. Hopefully that answered your question, Sam. Next question.
Hi, this question is a very simple and general one. I know you guys, Bryan and William, I believe, you got started contributing by having an issue, essentially, that you were trying to fix, and that's how you started. But do you guys find that's how most people get starting in contributing, or is there other ways, before getting started?
So, I mean, there's code and learn tomorrow, right? But no, I think most of what I've seen personally has been a lot of people finding problems that they need solved and then solving them. That seems to be my experience.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened for me. And so, like, if you want to continue contributing to Node Core, great things to do, like, if you have the time, is watching the repository. Again, it's a lot of messages, but it helps. And or using the Node's master branch locally on your own machine, just for everything you do with Node, because like obviously there's some bugs gonna slip in there, and yeah, if you catch them, you can fix them.
Yeah, I think most people have the same sort of start where they want to fix a problem or want to improve something in some way. What kind of varies I think is what comes after that. There's a lot of people that then start landing more commits. There's people that start doing more documentation. There's like all range of things, and we need to be like a thing on us is to keep looking at all the different ways that people contribute to bring people in.
And we have an interesting mix among the core contributors of individuals who are just contributing, by themselves, and those of us who are paid full time to work on Node. I mean, the reason I started working on Node is, my boss at IBM said, "Hey, James, go work on Node." So, okay, we're going to do that.
I actually first got into Node back in 2010, so a very long time ago, and that was, well, I should say I tried to commit something to Node way back then, and that was because a feature was missing, and it wasn't a bug, it wasn't a problem. I guess something not there is a problem, maybe? I don't know, however you want to look at that. But it wasn't until this year that, with the new foundation and the way things were structured, that I was able to come in and get involved. But I do think most people find a bug, find a problem, and then that brings them to the repos and trying to figure out, like, has anyone else seen this or done this? I'm going to open an issue, and maybe they get engaged. But there are a lot of people that we consider contributors that aren't there. They're helping out with events like this, or just helping out with the events in the community and things like that. And they're not really active on GitHub. So we're trying to open up the mindset of, contributing to Node is not just writing code in core. And so.
Cool. All right.
So William, you mentioned that you found the Code and Learn repository and it was just dead. If someone were to find another repository that they were interested in, but it was dead, how would you approach, any of you, how would you approach making it start going again? My approach to anything that I don't understand is to just kind of spit out the info that I was able to find. Because the more info that you can show that you've done your homework, done your research, it signals like you really put effort in. I mean, if you just open an issue that was like WTF, like people are just, it's going to go in the trash. But I have many issues I open and I'm like, I saw in this video, and I linked it right to YouTube to that time in the video where James Snell is talking about this. Whatever happened with that, that is in-depth homework, right? And it means I'm serious. I want to really know, and I really believe that this should happen. And I'm willing to put all this time from myself into this. And could somebody else please help me? Right. The more you show interest, the more somebody feels like you should get more attention, I think, is what I've observed.
Yeah, there was a lot of things when William first started getting involved. The TSC, we would have a lot of discussions, and a lot of things were going undone. And it was because either we didn't have time, or we just didn't get to it, or didn't think about we assumed somebody was doing it, like uploading the minutes to online. And I really appreciate the contribution that William's making. I mean, you haven't contributed any code to core, but I consider you one of the core contributors.
Well, documentation type of things, governance stuff. I changed the developer certificate of origin to version 0 to or 1 to 1.1.
Right. When I asked William to participate in the panel, it's a contributor panel. His first response was, "I'm not a contributor." It's like, yeah, you are. So
I'm not on the contributors list.
Yeah, there's many ways that that people can contribute. So, okay. So any other? I cannot see to the queue. So is there anyone else out there? No. Okay. So we have like 6 minutes. I'll do my final question unless there's anyone else. Let's queue up. Okay. So personal priorities, the personal threads you want to pull in Node over the next year or so.
Oh, yeah. That one's easy for me. I'll say it a different way, though. So what I observed was the Node Foundation was brought together, everybody was on board, and one of the biggest problems was solving the problems in Node core. The fork was there, had to come back together, get everybody in line on it again on one platform out there, and then this the LTS releases and all of that stuff. And then ES6 stuff came around, that blew up, and it was all important. And like all of these other things came around, they were really exciting. But the foundation was baby brand new, and there's like a lot of structure and setup of like, how are we doing this? What is the right way to do this, and how are we telling people we're doing this versus how we're really doing this? And so documentation. So for me, it's all about putting it down. And I would, the first year we were all scattered and did all those different directions, but I would like to keep that going, bring more people in to help solidify and like whittle things down. I recently started a thing of removing one of the working groups, the roadmap working group, that it wasn't doing anything, and the core team was basically doing it anyways, so, and nobody objected to it. So, you know, just little by little, taking this back in so it's very digestible for new people to come on, and that's definitely my high priority, you know that.
That's very appreciated. Anna?
I guess for me it's like what I've basically already touched. We have a lot of users that don't regularly interact with Node Core. And for example, when I first started contributing to Node Core, I was really surprised by how much of a disconnect there was between like Node Core and the people who were active on that and the rest of the ecosystem that I have had interacted with, which is obviously only part of it, but still, there was a pretty big disconnect. And I'd like to make sure that we listen to these people who don't usually have a voice.
All right, cool. Bryan?
Yes, so I think what I would like to you know, be involved with myself and see a lot more of in the coming year or so on is a lot more of the effort we had started with the documentation working group, which was making guides. So there was this effort to have a series of guides, like how do I actually use this API rather than just having the terse API docs. And that's an effort that I think I want to see that grow a lot more this year.
One of the things I've been helping out with, and that I'm going to be continuing, I think, quite a bit during the next year is we have a GitHub bot that does a bunch of automation stuff. That really helps out in bringing visibility to what a test status is from our continuous integration suite across like multiple platforms. And it also does some other things. It automatically tags things, tags issues, pull requests. So I think improving that will help like the developer experience a lot for people contributing to Node Core and helps smooth things out. And then also, I've already been in the weeds in this a little bit, but we kind of need to do something about ES modules. And so I'm probably going to be continuing to help lead that direction, along with Bradley Mack, wherever he is. We'll probably be working more on that to ensure that Node has a good story, or as best as we can get between spec authors and VMs and ourselves for all of you. Best story for ES modules and compatibility and all that.
Right. So that's thank you. I do have one more question. Bryan wanted me to just ask yes or no questions. So are you having fun?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. All right, we're good. Well, thank you very much. And